Hello, welcome to my channel. Yesterday, or the day before, I posted a video and comments ranged anywhere from, is anybody actually interested in this, to, you must be lying because a high priest group leader doesn't have the authority to tell you to quit doing sealings. There was a few other comments that people thought maybe I'm losing my faith or left the church or something like that. So I figured I'd do a follow-up because it's hard to say everything in 10 minutes or 12 or 13 or whatever it was. And so this will be like a part 2. And so first off, I didn't lose my faith. I didn't lose my testimony. I still believe in God. Nothing really changed other than I quit going to the temple. I haven't been to church in a few years, but, they don't necessarily teach in church what Christ taught. So, I still, I follow Christ, and that's what Christ said to do. He said, come follow me. He didn't say follow the prophet. In fact, there doesn't need to be a middleman between you and God at all. None. Zero. Zip. Nada. And so those people have no bearing whatsoever in your or my exaltation, or they just don't. And they have their heart and mind set on the things of the world, following the World Economic Forum for a new world order, and accepting homosexuality and the pride flag, and things that aren't Christ-like. So, but I follow Christ, and that's what He said to do, and so I am. And we all should be. And so, to give you an idea, I guess I have to go back a ways, go back 25 years. 25 years ago, I was ordered by the judge to go to rehab. I was an alcoholic. Still am, although I haven't had a cigarette or alcohol for 25 years. But anyhow, at that time, it was kind of a low spot in my life, and actually being sent to rehab was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. But anyway, so I quit drinking and smoking, both, at rehab. And it was a 6-month live-in rehab, and while I was there, I met this girl that she was already pregnant, and that's why she decided to go to rehab. She went to rehab voluntarily. I went because I was court-ordered. But anyhow, we left rehab together, and I hadn't lost everything. I still had 20 acres of land out in the desert in northeastern Arizona. So we went there when we left rehab and lived in a camper, actually. But anyway, so the bishop convinced us to get married, and so we did, and the baby was born, and so the baby got my last name, and because we were married. And so then after about 6 months, we discovered that the baby wasn't putting on weight right, and so the doctor said that she had problems with her liver, but they could probably fix it with by opening her up and creating a bile duct and whatever that. So anyway, they did that, and it didn't work. So she was still pretty sick. We had to feed her with a feeding machine, which she didn't like much. It was a thing that a tube went down her nose into her stomach, and it pumped feed into her every once in a while on a regular basis, 24/7, so that she didn't starve to death. And so they said, well, she needs a liver transplant. And so that was a pretty big deal. And, you know, it was going to cost a lot of money. I didn't notice how much. But anyway, social services said, well, we're not paying for that. They said, you're an alcoholic, your wife's a drug abuser, and a liver transplant is a lifetime thing. She's going to need medical care forever, the rest of her life, until she dies, you know, from, you know, anti-rejection medication and, you know, what have you. They said, and your marriage isn't going to last. They said to me, you're an alcoholic and your wife's a drug addict, and you're the worst parents on earth, and so we're not going to spend even one penny to keep her alive. Well, she was already 6 months old, and so I'd kind of fallen in love with her, really. So I didn't want her to die. So I had to figure out how to raise the money to pay the doctors and to get a liver and to put it in her. And so I was actually able to do that. That's probably a whole nother video by itself, because that was a miracle in itself. But anyhow, so she got the liver transplant and was fine. It was several months, because there were several months before she went in the hospital, because they wanted her right there, an apartment across the street from the hospital, so that when they got a liver, that they didn't have to go find her. They wanted her within minutes. And so she lived across the street for several months until the transplant, and then she lived there for several more months until they felt comfortable that she was good enough to go home. So all in all, she was gone about 11 months. So anyway, so her mother was with her. I went down from time to time, but I was hundreds of miles away. Anyhow, so a guy that I used to go fishing with, and we used to go fishing and get drunk and stuff like that. And so he come by one day when it's like over 100 degrees outside, and he has a cooler full of ice cold beer, Budweiser. Asked me if I wanted a cold beer, and this was before my wife and baby come back from the hospital, so I'd been living there by myself for several months. So I said, okay, I'll have a beer. And I did, and that broke my sobriety, and that really made me mad that he would do that, you know, because they thought it was funny. Let's go give him a beer. I bet you we can get him to drink it. They thought it was funny, but really it wasn't funny at all. And so when my wife and baby came back from the hospital, we moved to Utah. And the reason we did that was because I wanted to get away from everybody that I knew. And I didn't want anybody to ever bring me a beer again, ever. 25 years later, nobody's brought me a beer. So anyway, so we moved to Utah. Now, I didn't have a place to settle in Utah right away. I just knew that I had to get out of Arizona. So we moved to West Valley, it's by Salt Lake, and I was selling stuff on eBay and Amazon. I was doing pretty good, actually. I made several $1,000s a month, which this was back in 2007, 2008. So anyway, I lived in a $500,000 house in a nice neighborhood, a new neighborhood. Half the houses weren't even built yet. So I was doing okay, you know, living. But anyway, one day she got sick, and you know, some waste of human flesh mother let their kid go to school with H1N1, probably in the hopes that their kid would kill another kid. But anyway, so she got real sick, and so my wife took her to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake, and they said, well, she's got H1N1, and because she's on these anti-rejection drugs, there's really nothing we can do. We can't give her anything, because if we do, it'll make her reject her liver, and then she'll die anyway. So let's just see what happens. So she didn't go to school, and she stayed home, and we tried to care for her the best we could, but she just kept getting worse and worse. And so one day, my wife took her to the hospital, and they said, bring her in the morning, and we'll give her a private room, and it'll be a clean room, and we can put her on an IV, and there'll be no germs and no infection, no nothing in there. And we'll see if there's anything that can be done, we'll do it. They said, but there's really nothing we can do. You might as well she'll probably last a week, and then she'll die. So that's what they told us. Doctor told us she was going to die. So, you know, I had gotten active in the church after I, wasn't drinking anymore and that. And so one day in priesthood meeting, they handed out these vials of consecrated oil and a little pamphlet, that brochure thing, a couple of pages that said how to administer various ordinances. Anyway, so I put that in the closet and forgot about it. And we had been feeding the missionaries. The missionaries used to come by, 3, 5, 6 days a week for dinner. They did that for several months, and which is no big deal, because they didn't like real food. We'd order a pizza. That's what they wanted. So anyway, so the missionaries came over the night before we was going to take her to the hospital, and they said, "Where's Audrey?" And, "Oh, she's sick. What's the matter with her?" "She's got H1N1. And I said, "Can you administer to her?" And they was already grabbing their coats and heading out the door. They says, "No, no, 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 no. We're not even allowed to be around it. For sure, it's totally against church policy to administer to anyone. The leaders have no faith whatsoever that H1N1 can be cured." And they headed out the door to never return, ever. And that was that. The church, they was under strict orders not to ask God to help anyone that had H1N1. Now that, this right there in itself, tells 18 million stories, because it means that the church was afraid. They had zero faith in God, and they were frauds. So anyway, but I didn't think all that right then. What I did was, I went and read the pamphlet that I had stashed with the oil, consecrated oil. And so I'm reading the pamphlet, and I see, well, I can do this by myself. This on the missionaries that have no faith in God. And so, so I waited until she went to sleep. So she's in bed, and I got the oil in one hand and the pamphlet in the other. And I'm making sure I do this right. And so I asked God to save her. So I didn't wake her up. I didn't even tell my wife. I just went to bed. Then in the morning, this is the day after they had said she'll die within a week. But in the morning, after I administered to her, my wife took her to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake. And I had some stuff to do. I had my warehouse and office in the basement. And so she went by herself. And so I stayed home. And about an hour or so later, they come back. And I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, when we got there, the doctors examined her before admitting her, and there was no sign of H1N1. So that made a believer out of me. And I mean, I had never administered to anybody before, and I didn't have a lot of high expectations that I was going to get positive results either, because I hadn't been such a good person. And so it was a last resort. I had no other choice. It was all I could do. Some people said, you must have had a lot of faith. I didn't have a lot of faith. And I just, sometimes I guess, if you ask a parent for something, they say yes. So now she's 24 years old, healthy. She went, so after that, her mother left and went back to Arizona to be a drug addict on the street. So I raised the kid and put her through elementary school and junior high school, and she graduated with 4 years of seminary. And so she's a good kid. And so I didn't lose my testimony at all. So I just see that the church is the one that lost their testimony. All the people don't. Their faith is in the prophet, and the quorum of the 12 and the first presidency, they don't have any faith. I mean, you can say anything in words to get money on TV and stuff, but it's like the scriptures say, you'll know them by their fruits. And their fruits are rotten. I mean, they're out there telling the people, what to do about this pandemic that we were in that was, and of course they were wrong. And they haven't admitted it. But, just their 100% total lack of faith that God could actually heal somebody, or that would heal somebody. I mean, they must have more faith in Lucifer than God. But I didn't lose my testimony. I still believe the scriptures every bit as much as I ever did. And so, when the people, the bishops, and the stake presidents and that, they stand up and they lie. And, they tell people to go get a shot or whatever. And they're just, some of them know that what they're doing is wrong, and they don't, but they're ordered to do it. They're under strict orders to lie. And it's like KSL TV and radio. What a bunch of liars, telling people to vote for Kamala and supporting Mitt Romney, and what's that guy that died that was the senator from Harry Reid from Nevada, because he was a Mormon, and so the church, they've become interested in man. They've become worldly. And Isaiah said that in the last days, the leaders of the church are drunkards of Ephraim, mad dogs. So either you believe the scriptures or you believe the church, because they're not on the same page at all. Now, conference is tomorrow, general conference. So, they can quote each other all day long. They should be quoting Christ. So count how many times they quote each other versus how many times they quote Christ. And you'll see where their faith is. And, for them to claim to be the only authorized spokesman for God on the earth, you'd think that once in a while they'd say, "Thus saith the Lord." Do you know they haven't said, "Thus saith the Lord," in over 100 years? Ha! Anyway, I just wanted to put that first video I just wanted to update it a little bit for people that was concerned about my welfare, that think I lost my faith or testimony, and I didn't. So that's all I got to say today, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.